For me, scrolling through my photos is kind of like opening up a time capsule because each image brings back a flood of memories. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm Jo Clark and I'm so glad you're here. And this is a podcast for women who are ready to break free from outdated stereotypes, rediscover themselves, and embrace the endless opportunities that midlife brings. Each week, I'll share expert advice, actionable strategies, and inspiring conversations with incredible women who are redefining what it means to thrive in midlife and beyond. From health and wellness to reigniting your purpose and passions, this is your go-to podcast for feeling empowered, supported, and seen. And midlife isn't the end. It's your time to shine, rewrite your story, and create a life that you truly love. So let's get started. Welcome to the very first episode of 2025. I really hope you've come out of this festive season feeling intact, whether it was a whirlwind of your family gatherings or endless to-do lists, or maybe you had a quieter time for reflection. Whatever your break was, I hope you managed to find just a little pocket of rest. Now, as we settle into this new year, I really want to take a moment to thank you, whether you've been with me since that very first episode or whether you're tuning in for the first time today. I'm just so grateful that you're here. You're the reason the podcast exists, and knowing we've built this beautiful community together is something that I never take for granted. I'd love to share a little bit of a backstory about this podcast, because starting it wasn't easy. In fact, I sat on the idea for a couple of years. For myself, I just love learning, and I also love teaching and sharing what I've learned. I love talking, and above all, I love connecting with people. So a podcast was actually the perfect solution. But the whole thought of putting myself out there, being raw, being vulnerable, with just my voice, that was daunting. In fact, it was terrifying. And most podcasts have well-known presenters who are established with a ready-made audience, and they succeed with their name alone. They've got sponsors, they've got advertisers, and they've got marketing teams to push their podcast out to everybody. And that's definitely not my story. So I had plenty of limiting beliefs and proof that, it's going to be hard. And then I was thinking, what if people judge me? What if I failed? What if no one listened? And then I just asked myself, what if this podcast helps just one person, one woman, to feel seen, to be heard, and to be feeling as though she is supported? And that thought was just enough to push me past that fear. And let me tell you, pressing record for that very first episode, it was nerve-wracking, but I'm just so glad I did it, because since then I've received countless messages from women sharing how this podcast has impacted them in some way. Some have said it's inspired them to prioritize their health. Others have said it's helped them feel less alone in their struggles. And to know it's making a difference makes all the time and all the effort and cost of this podcast worthwhile. And one of the most beautiful things about this podcast is the connection that it creates. It's a space where I can share parts of myself that I wouldn't normally put out there. And if you've been listening for a while, you probably know me better than some of my closest friends. And by midlife, we've all been through some incredible highs and some of those really gut-wrenching lows. So sharing those experiences, whether they're mine or whether they're my guests or even yours, is how we remind each other that we're never alone. And last year, I received some pretty exciting news about the podcast. The Redefining Midlife podcast is now in the top 5% of podcasts globally. That's out of over 3 million podcasts. And I've had listeners in over 63 countries. Now, when I received those stats, I really was in disbelief because 2.5 years ago, or less than 2.5 years ago, the podcast didn't even exist. But to me, it's just such a powerful reminder not to let our doubts and our fears hold us back. So if you've been sitting on an idea and waiting for the perfect time to start, let this be your sign just to go for it. If little old me can do something like this, you can also do something that can seem or feel out of reach. Because if not now, when? When are you going to do it? And if you love what we're building here and you want to be a part of this podcast, there's just a few small things that you can do to help. So firstly, click the follow button because it ensures you'll never miss an episode. It's in the upper right-hand corner wherever you're listening. Just click that follow button. And if you feel called to share an episode with another midlife woman and rate and review the show, that would be awesome, because there might be a friend who just needs to hear it. And all of these little things just take less than a minute to do, but they make the world of difference, because this podcast doesn't have sponsors or ads to help me pay for the show. So the research and the planning and the time and all the cost of production come out of my own pocket. And it does feel really awkward asking you to do those small things. But as I've learned in life, and as that saying goes, if you don't ask, you don't get. So now on with the show, and let's talk about taking a year in review in order to make this year amazing. And this process is one of the most valuable things that you can do as you step into the new year. Because it's fairly rare that we get that chance to pause, to reflect, and take stock of where you've been before diving headfirst into what's coming up next. And for me, this isn't just a once-a-year ritual. It really is a grounding practice, because it helps me move forward with clarity and with intention, rather than just carrying the same patterns and the same frustrations or unexamined wins into the next chapter of my life. And if you've never done this before, don't worry, it's way simpler than you think, and I'll walk you through it step by step. So grab a pen or paper or open the Notes app on your phone and let's dive in deeper. So step 1, I'll get you to reflect month by month. So the first step is all about taking a good hard look at the past year. Now, I know life moves fast, and if you're like me, you've probably forgotten a big chunk of what happened back, say, in March of 2024. That's okay. This process is all about bringing those moments back to life. And here's where your tools come in. Pull out your calendar, pull out your diary, or even your phone's photo gallery. For me, scrolling through my photos is kind of like opening up a time capsule, because each image brings back a flood of memories, some big, some small, but all of them are worth noting. So start with January 2024 of last year. What stands out? Was there a lesson in that month? Was there an achievement, or just a fleeting joyful moment that brought a smile to your face? Write it down and then move on to February, to March, and so on, working through all of the 12 months. And don't just focus on the big events, the big celebrations that might have happened. The magic is often in the details, like it could be a coffee date that you had with an old friend. So go back through your diary. When did you meet up with someone that you haven't seen for ages? Maybe it was that walk in nature that cleared your head, or even that quiet evening when you finally finished a book that had been sitting on your nightstand for months. Go back and think about all of the small things, because the small things add up. And by the time you finish this step, you'll have a big list of moments. Some of them you've probably forgotten, and some you absolutely cherish. And that collectively tells a story of your year. And let me tell you, it's often eye-opening, because you might be saying to yourself, wow, I forgot about that. I really did that. Or I didn't realize how much I've grown or how much I've changed. So the second step is to celebrate your wins. So you've compiled your list. Now pause and celebrate. And I mean really celebrate. Don't skim over this part. We don't often focus on what we're happy about, what we want to celebrate, what's important to us. But this is important. Look at what you've written. What are you proud of? What moments made you feel really capable or joyful? Or it made you feel like you were truly living in alignment with your values, because that is so important. Wins don't have to be huge and monumental to matter. Maybe you tackled a big project at work, or maybe your win was something quieter. Just like showing up for yourself consistently. That's huge. Most people don't do that. So if you've done that, that's a massive win. Maybe you set boundaries. Boundaries at work, boundaries at home, boundaries within a friendship or a relationship. Or maybe you finally said no to something that didn't serve you. For me, one of my proudest moments in 2024 was staying true to my word of the year. My word of the year last year was abundance. And it wasn't about the big material things like abundance, and people go and bang on about abundance meaning money and abundance meaning stuff. But for me, it was more about finding the richness in the everyday. I learned to notice abundance in the smallest details, like the laughter of my family during dinner, the crisp air of the morning walk in winter, or the comforting ritual of a cup of tea, sitting and having a cup of coffee with my husband of a morning. Now, celebrating these wins is important because we often focus on what we didn't do or what didn't go well. So this step actually flips that whole script. It's your opportunity to truly honor yourself for just showing up, for trying, and for simply being here. That requires celebrating. Now, the third step is all about reflecting on the challenges. So we're going to be talking about the harder moments because let's face it, no year is without its struggles. This next step isn't about dwelling on the negative or about beating yourself up. It really is more about that learning and the growing that comes from looking and reflecting. So ask yourself, what was one tough moment or situation that I faced this year? Another question to ask, what did it teach me about myself, about others, or about life? And importantly, how did I grow because of it? Every year, we're changing. So every year, if you want to have a life that's more fulfilling, we need to learn from what's happened in the past in order to create something even better in the future. So perhaps you had a year of huge challenges. Maybe it was a health challenge. Maybe you navigated a difficult relationship, or maybe you had to make a tough decision. These moments, as painful as they might have been, they often hold the greatest lessons for us. So, for example, perhaps you learned the importance of saying no and protecting your energy. Or maybe you discovered how strong you are in the face of adversity. Whatever it is, write it down. These lessons are our absolute gifts. And even if they don't feel that way at the time, when you look back, they will have given you something super important. And well, maybe we can throw in a celebration here. You survived your worst day from last year. Now, step 4, what would you do differently? Think about what you might have done differently. And let me be clear, this isn't about regret. This is all about gaining clarity and setting yourself up for success in the future. Maybe there was a moment when you reacted out in frustration or fear, and looking back, you wish you would have responded with more patience or courage. Maybe you missed an opportunity because self-doubt held you back. So ask yourself, if I were in that situation again, what would I do differently? So it's not about fixing the past, it's about shaping the future. And if we can identify these moments, then you're giving yourself and equipping yourself to handle some similar situations that might come up in the future. And you'll have more confidence and more grace moving forward. And step 5, we're going to be talking about setting a guiding word for the new year. And this is one of my favourite parts of this whole process, choosing your word for the year. And this word becomes almost like your guiding light, becomes your anchor and your reminder of what you want to embody in the months ahead. In 2024, my word of the year was abundance, as I said earlier, and it changed how I experienced my year because I started to see abundance everywhere. Even when the poo was hitting the fan, there was something around me that was, abundant. If I looked outside, I could see the beautiful trees. If I listened, I might be able to hear the birds or something, a sound in nature. There was abundance everywhere, even at the time when I may have been feeling lack. This year, my word for 2025 is ease. Even just saying that word ease makes me feel big breath out. Because when I think of ease, I imagine a simplicity, I imagine calm, and I imagine some flow. Because it's all about letting go of anything that's unnecessary, any unnecessary complications, and then embracing a sense of grace, even in challenging moments. If something feels hard or overwhelming, I want to ask myself, how can I make it simpler? How can I bring more ease into this situation? So if you're choosing a word for the first time, think about what you want more of in life. Is it joy? Is it courage? Is it growth? Whatever it is, let it be a touchstone for you to return to again and again throughout the year. Now, I've actually done a small episode probably around about this time last year on a word of the year. So if you want to go back to find that episode, we can pop that in the show notes. Just go back to it and listen if you want to have some more information on how you can choose a word for the year. But just remember, it's never too late to start a new goal or have some intentions to focus on for the year or choosing a guiding word for the year. The most important thing that you need to remember is to start. Goals don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be perfect. They just need to reflect what matters most to you. So don't wait for things around you to align and be great. It becomes great when you start. So just thinking about your goals, writing them down, that's step number 1 for you. The real change happens when you take action. And action becomes way more effective when you've got the right support and accountability to keep you moving forward. And that's why I'm really passionate about helping women like you create and achieve goals that truly align with their values and dreams. And that's why this episode has existed and I've created it for you. And through any of my coaching, my mentoring, I get to walk alongside women as they rediscover their purpose and the design, the life that they might want to live. You can do it by yourself. You can do it with me. You can do it with somebody else. But whatever you have and whatever you choose, have somebody there who is going to support you to help you make this come into reality. So if you are ready to take that next step or just curious about how I could support you, you can visit my website, joeclarkcoaching.com, and you can have a look in the work with me section and you can just see what I've got available and how I help women. But whatever you choose to do, I'd love to hear from you and help you make this year one of growth, transformation, and ease. And by listening to these sorts of episodes that I've got planned throughout the whole year, that will help you. Now, the next week's guest, before I go, I want to give you a little sneak peek into the guest I have for next week, because I'm going to be chatting with Jackie Duckworth. And Jackie is a London-based midlife advocate, and her life story is nothing short of extraordinary. Her work supporting and empowering midlife women really is incredibly inspiring. And our conversation had me laughing, it had me crying, and it had me feeling so energized by the end. So trust me, you won't want to miss it. Until next time, keep redefining your midlife and Happy New Year. Thanks so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you feel inspired to make the next chapter of your life the best one yet. And remember to share this episode with someone else who would love it and connect with me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Jo Clark Coaching. All the links and the details from today's episode are in the show notes or at joeclarkcoaching.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe this show on your favorite podcast app and leave a 5-star rating and review. This helps more midlife women find these empowering conversations. I can't wait to chat with you next week. Until then, take care and keep creating a life that you love.